Beloved, when I was first converted and filled with the Holy Spirit, I became aware in very short order that I had an enemy, and the enemy had a lot of friends that were pursuing my soul to oppress it, to push against the life of Christ that was being grown and shaped and formed in me. And I began to cry out to God for how to wage an effective warfare and fight a good fight of faith. And the Spirit, believe it or not, led me to begin to meditate on the book of James from beginning to end. And I read it dozens and dozens of times. And while I had heard so many messages, even at that early stage on James in terms of faith without works is dead, the more I looked at the book of James, the more I realized, wait a minute, James isn't just talking about our good works. James is talking about the contrast and the fight and the battle, the cosmic battle between heavenly wisdom and earthly wisdom that bears itself out in our inner world, in our psyche, in our perceptions, our cognitions, our intuitions, our imaginations, our memories, our will, and the way we express all that in the context in which we live. When you live from heavenly wisdom, which is peaceable, pure, gentle, easy to be received, full of good mercy and good fruit, and non-judgmental, and sown without hypocrisy and righteousness, you gain insight into the real nature of what's going on in every context you are in and in the relationships you're a part of and the way people behave and the motives from which they're moving. Because we live in a culture that is rife with selfish ambition and self-centeredness and even narcissistic tendencies and what's in it for me. And it's hard when we live in that day after day not to sometimes say, well, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? But the wisdom from above cause us to walk the crucified life and to lay our lives down for others and not to do things from any place of selfish ambition, because James warns us that anytime we do that, we're headed towards a path of destruction, just like Adam and Eve were. And so I need to learn how to discern inside me through the receptivity in my heart to the Holy Spirit as to what is the difference in my perceptions and cognitions, my intuitions, my imaginations, etc., when I'm yielded to the heavenly wisdom as opposed to wanting what's natural. Because earthly wisdom is earthly, natural, unspiritual, demonic, James says. Now, we think of the demons as imps from hell that harass us in certain areas, when James is saying there's far more going on to the demonic than the simple ways in which we look at it. And the battle is waged in our perceptions, our cognitions, our imaginations, our intuitions. And if we're not congruent on the inside, if we're fragmented and pulled in a number of different ways because of our unfinished business and our need to have it our way, we're being ruled because we've lost insight. And we've lost insight because we are not yielded to heavenly wisdom, and therefore we're being ruled by demonic princes and powers. And so it's a sobering thing to realize that faith without works is dead may have a whole lot more to do with how the work on the inside of faith being that which yields itself to the cross-shaped life and the work of the Spirit by the intercession of Christ, so that I can gain insight and say, oh my goodness, this is selfish ambition. This is self-aggrandizement. This is self-centeredness. This is not cross-shaped. I reject this. I resist this. I want this to flee from me. And beloved, we're living in a day where we need to understand afresh how to walk by faith and not by sight. And that word sight there in the Greek is by our senses, by our natural ways of knowing. So when it's natural, it isn't always healthy. James says when it's natural, it's earthly. When it's earthly, it's unspiritual. And if all that is present, it is demonic, and it leads to destruction. May God give us heavenly wisdom so that we live this life from a place of faith, so that we resist the devil and he flees from us. Have a great weekend.